English podcast with Lara.
Hello, welcome to English Podcast with Lara. I'm Lara.
And I'm David, really happy to be here with you all today.
It is so good to have you back, David. Honestly, this week felt long.
It really did. I don't even know where Monday went. It just disappeared.
Right? I had this whole list of things I was going to do on Monday morning, and by the time I actually sat down, it was almost 3 in the afternoon.
That is so relatable. I had the exact same thing happen to me this week. I kept telling myself, I'll get to it later. I'll get to it after lunch, after this one thing.
And then later never really comes, does it?
It absolutely does not. I had this report I needed to finish. Nothing complicated, maybe 2 hours of actual work, and I kept putting it off for 3 days.
Putting it off. Yes, that is such a real feeling. And the funny thing about putting something off is that the longer you wait, the bigger it feels in your head.
Exactly. By day 3, it felt like this enormous mountain, even though it was just a simple report.
Did you finally get around to it?
I did. Last night at 9 p.m., which is not ideal, but it got done.
I love that you got around to it, even if the timing was a little dramatic. But honestly, that whole experience you just described, putting things off, waiting, then finally doing it under pressure, that is something so many people deal with every single day.
And it makes you think, why is it so hard to just do the thing when you're supposed to do it?
That is genuinely one of the most interesting questions, and it connects to something we are going to be talking about today, which is self-discipline. Not in a strict, boring way, but in a really honest, human way.
Yes, and I feel like this topic is one of those things everyone has an opinion about, but not everyone actually understands what it involves.
And if you are watching or listening right now and this already sounds familiar to you, you are in the right place. We are really glad you're here.
And if you have not already, hit that subscribe button and give this episode a like. It genuinely helps more people find us, and honestly, it means a lot to both of us.
It really does. Okay, so David, back to your report situation, because I think there's something interesting in there.
Please, dig into it. I can handle it.
When you finally sat down and did it, how long did it actually take?
Honestly, about an hour and 40 minutes.
So you put it off for 3 days and it took less than 2 hours?
When you say it like that, it sounds terrible.
No, it sounds human. That gap between knowing you need to do something and actually doing it, that is exactly where self-discipline lives.
That's a really good way to put it. It's not about being perfect, it's about closing that gap.
And closing that gap is something anyone can work on, which is kind of the whole point of today. Because I think a lot of people hear the word discipline and they immediately picture someone waking up at 5 a.m., running 10 kilometers, eating plain oatmeal, and never watching TV.
The ultra-productive robot human.
Exactly. And that image is actually really damaging because it makes people feel like if they are not doing all of that, they are failing at discipline entirely.
I used to think that way, genuinely. I thought disciplined people were just built differently, like they had some kind of extra willpower that I did not have.
And that word, willpower, is so interesting because most people treat it like a fixed thing, like you either have it or you do not.
Right, like it's a personality trait you're born with.
But research actually suggests that willpower is more like a muscle. It can get tired, it can be strengthened, and it responds to how you treat it.
That's a really different way of thinking about it. So it's less about who you are and more about what you practice.
Precisely. And that's why consistency matters so much more than intensity. Like doing something small every single day builds more real discipline than doing something huge once a month.
Consistency over intensity. I like that. It reminds me of when I tried to get back into exercising last year.
I went really hard the first week, 2-hour sessions every day, and by day 8, I was completely burned out.
Oh, the classic all or nothing approach.
Total disaster. And then I felt guilty for stopping, which made it even harder to start again.
That guilt cycle is so real. And the thing is, when you bounce back from a setback, even a small return to the habit counts. It doesn't have to be the full 2-hour session.
Bounce back, yes. I did eventually get back to it, but I scaled it way down. 20 minutes, 3 times a week, and that actually stuck.
And that right there is such a perfect example of what real consistency looks like. It's not glamorous, but it works.
Can I ask something to everyone listening right now? Do you think self-discipline is something you're born with or something you can actually learn and build over time? I'm genuinely curious what you think.
Please drop your answer in the comments. We read them, we love them, and sometimes they genuinely change how we think about things.
And there's no wrong answer, by the way. This is not a test.
Definitely not a test. But it's a real question because I think where you stand on that changes how you approach building discipline in your own life.
If you think it's fixed, you give up faster. If you think it's learnable, you keep trying.
And that mindset shift alone, just believing it's something you can grow, that might be the first and most important step.
It's almost like the belief has to come before the behavior.
That's exactly it. And once you start seeing discipline as a skill rather than a trait, you start looking at your daily life very differently.
You start noticing the things that are working against you, the little patterns you didn't even realize were there.
Which is where it gets really interesting, because a lot of those patterns are not random. They're connected to your environment and the triggers around you.
Triggers. Yes, that is such a good word for it, because it is not always about laziness or not caring enough.
Not at all. A trigger is basically something in your environment or routine that sets off a certain behavior almost automatically.
Like the moment I sit on my couch after dinner, something in my brain just switches into scroll mode.
The couch trigger is real, David. It is very real.
I did not even decide to pick up my phone. It just happens. 1 minute I'm sitting down to relax, and the next I'm 40 minutes deep into videos I don't even care about.
That's what it means to be on autopilot. You're not making a conscious choice anymore. Your brain is just running a program it's run hundreds of times before.
And the scary part is you don't even notice it happening until you're already in the middle of it.
Exactly. And once you slip into that pattern, it's really hard to pull yourself out because the habit is already in motion.
Slip into, I like that phrase. It feels very accurate. Like you didn't jump in, you just gradually slid there.
That's a great observation. And it's actually a really useful phrasal verb to know. You can slip into a bad habit, slip into a routine, even slip into a conversation.
I feel like I slip into procrastination the same way. It starts with just one small delay, and before I know it, the whole afternoon is gone.
And the environment around you makes it so much easier or harder to resist that. Like if your phone is sitting right next to your laptop while you're trying to work, that's a trigger just waiting to fire.
I actually moved my phone to another room when I work now, and it made a genuinely surprising difference.
That's such a practical thing, and it connects to something important. Removing the trigger is often more effective than trying to resist the temptation once it's already in front of you.
Because resisting temptation takes energy, and that energy runs out.
Right. And we all have a limited amount of mental energy in a day. Every time you have to fight a temptation, you're spending some of that energy.
So the smarter move is to just not put yourself in the situation in the first place.
If you can redesign your environment so the temptation is not right there in your face, you're not relying on willpower at all.
That actually reminds me of something my sister does. She used to eat a lot of junk food in the evenings, and instead of trying to resist it, she just stopped buying it.
Simple but brilliant.
She said, if it's not in the house, I can't eat it. The temptation doesn't even get a chance to show up.
And that's not weakness. That's actually a really intelligent strategy. Working with your brain instead of against it.
I used to think that kind of thing was cheating somehow. Like real discipline means white-knuckling it through every temptation.
White knuckling, yes. That image of just gripping through the pain.
But it turns out that approach is exhausting and mostly unsustainable.
Because discipline that depends entirely on fighting yourself every single moment is not really a system. It's just stress.
And speaking of systems, I feel like the morning is where a lot of people either win or lose their whole day before it even starts.
That's so true. And it's actually something I want us to dig into a little more closely, maybe even act it out a bit.
Oh, a role play? I am ready. Let us do it.
Okay, so here's the scenario. You are someone who has decided, genuinely decided, that you want to build a more disciplined morning routine. But it is day 3 and things are already falling apart.
Day 3 is always where it falls apart.
Always. So I am going to be your friend who is checking in on you, and you are going to be completely honest about how the morning went. Ready?
Ready, and I will warn you, it is not a pretty picture.
Okay, here we go. Hey, so how did this morning go? Did you manage to get up at 6 like you planned?
I mean, I heard the alarm. I definitely heard it.
But
I told myself just 5 more minutes, and then somehow it was 7:45.
the 5 more minutes trap. Okay, so the alarm went off, you snoozed it, and then what?
Then I grabbed my phone because I just wanted to check one thing, and then I was just lying there scrolling for like 30 minutes.
All right, so by the time you actually got up, you were already behind, already a little stressed.
Very stressed, and then I skipped breakfast because there was no time, just grabbed the coffee and sat down to work, but my brain was completely foggy.
Okay, I hear you, and I'm not going to tell you that you failed, because you did not fail. But I do want to ask you something. When you planned this routine, did you actually build it around your real mornings or around the perfect version of your mornings?
Probably the perfect version.
That is really honest. And that is actually where a lot of routines break down, because a routine that only works when everything is ideal is not really a routine, it's a wish.
A wish. Okay, that stings a little, but it's fair.
I say it with love. So here's what I think. Instead of trying to drag yourself out of bed at 6 on day 1, what if you started with 6:45 and actually made that work first?
That feels too easy, though.
I know it feels that way, but you might want to think of it differently. Getting up at 6:45 every single day for 2 weeks does more for your discipline than getting up at 6 once and then sleeping until 9 for the next 4 days.
Consistency over intensity again.
Exactly. And another thing, you should put your phone on the other side of the room before you go to sleep, not in the morning when you're already half asleep and negotiating with yourself.
Prepare the environment the night before.
Yes, because morning you is not to be trusted.
Morning me is absolutely not to be trusted. That is completely accurate.
And one more thing, you need to hold yourself accountable, not in a punishing way, but in a gentle, honest way. Like if you miss the alarm, you don't throw the whole day away, you just set the tone for the next hour instead.
Set the tone. I like that. So even a late start can still have direction.
Exactly. One small intentional action after a rough start can completely shift how the rest of the day feels.
That is actually really reassuring because I think when I mess up the morning, I kind of write off the whole day in my head.
And that all or nothing thinking is one of the biggest things that works against discipline because no day is ever going to be perfect.
So, staying in the role play for a second, what would you tell me to do tomorrow morning specifically? Like, what is the one non-negotiable thing?
Okay, still in the scene. I would say pick one thing, just one, that you do before you touch your phone. It could be drinking a glass of water. It could be making your bed. It could be 5 minutes of stretching. But that one thing becomes non-negotiable.
Non-negotiable meaning no matter what, it happens.
No matter what. Because when you have one anchor in your morning, something that always happens, it gives the rest of the day something to attach to.
I actually tried the making your bed thing once, and I remember feeling weirdly more productive after.
It is not weird at all. It is a small completion. Your brain registers that you finished something, and that feeling carries forward.
Okay, stepping out of the role play for a second because I want to say something I noticed.
Go ahead.
When I was in the scene, I actually said something like, I have been so tired since yesterday, and I realized I might have said that wrong.
Oh, that is a great thing to bring up. What did you say exactly?
I think I said, I am very tired since yesterday.
Ah, yes. That is a really common mistake, and it's such a good one to catch. When you are describing something that started in the past and is still happening right now, you need the present perfect continuous. So instead of, I am very tired since yesterday, it would be, I have been tired since yesterday.
I have been tired since yesterday because the tiredness started yesterday and it's still going on now.
Exactly right. The present perfect continuous connects the past to the present. I am tired is just right now. I have been tired since yesterday shows it has been ongoing.
And I think I also said something like, I did not slept well.
Yes, I caught that too. After did not, the verb goes back to its base form. So it's I did not sleep well, not I did not slept well. The did is already doing the past tense work. So sleep stays in its simple form.
I did not sleep well, right? Because did is handling the tense already.
Exactly. And these are mistakes that even intermediate learners make all the time. So please do not feel bad if you've made them too.
I have definitely made them more than once.
And honestly, noticing your own mistakes mid-conversation, the way David just did there, that's a real sign of growth. That kind of self-awareness is huge.
It helped that we were in a low-pressure situation. The role play made it easier to just speak without overthinking.
That's actually one of the best things about practicing through roleplay. You get to use the language in a real context without the fear of real consequences.
And you start to cut yourself some slack, which I think is something a lot of language learners forget to do.
Cut yourself some slack, yes. Be a little gentler with yourself. Progress is not always linear, and that's completely fine.
And speaking of progress, can I just say that even the way you corrected me just now felt really natural. It did not feel like being told I was wrong.
That is the goal, honestly, because the moment correction feels like criticism, people shut down and stop trying.
Which connects back to discipline in a way, because if you are too hard on yourself every time you make a mistake, you lose the motivation to keep going.
Completely. And that brings me to something I wanted to talk about, which is pronunciation. Because I think it is one of those areas where people are especially hard on themselves.
Oh, for sure. I remember when I was learning, I was so afraid of saying something wrong that I would just stay quiet in conversations.
And silence feels safe, but it actually slows everything down. You learn so much faster when you are speaking, even imperfectly.
So let us talk about some of the words from today because I want to make sure people are saying them correctly.
Yes, let us start with the word discipline itself, because I hear it mispronounced a lot.
How do people usually get it wrong?
The most common mistake is putting the stress on the wrong syllable. People sometimes say discipline with the emphasis at the end, but the correct stress is discipline. The first syllable carries the weight.
Discipline. And that last syllable is really short, almost swallowed.
Exactly. The final syllable is reduced. It's not a full pline, it's more like plin. Discipline.
Discipline.
Okay, I think I have it.
Good. Now let's try consistent. This one trips people up too.
I feel like I've been saying it correctly, but now I'm second-guessing myself.
That's the effect of thinking too hard about pronunciation. The stress in consistent falls on the second syllable. Consistent.
Consistent, not consistent.
Right. The middle syllable is the strongest one. And this matters because, in English, putting stress on the wrong syllable can actually make a word hard to understand, even if all the sounds are correct.
That's something I never really thought about. It's not just about individual sounds, it's about where the weight falls.
Exactly. And there's another thing I want to highlight, which is how words connect in natural speech. Take the phrase, hold yourself accountable. When you say it at normal speed, it doesn't sound like four separate words.
It kind of blends together, right?
It does. Hold yourself starts to sound like hold yourself, because the D at the end of hold links directly into the Y of yourself. That linking is completely normal and natural.
So if someone hears hold yourself accountable and doesn't recognize it, they might miss the whole phrase.
Which is why shadowing is such a powerful practice. Let me say the full sentence at natural speed. And David, you repeat it right after me. And if you're watching at home, say it out loud too. You need to hold yourself accountable.
You need to hold yourself accountable.
Really good. Notice how the stress lands on hold and accountable. Those are the words carrying the meaning.
And sentence stress is interesting because it can actually shift the meaning depending on which word you emphasize.
That's a perfect point. I want to be disciplined sounds like you're defending yourself. But I want to be disciplined sounds like you are stating a genuine goal.
Same words, completely different feeling.
That is the power of stress in English. And once you start hearing it, you cannot unhear it.
It is like once you notice it, every conversation starts to sound different. You start picking up on all these little shifts.
And that awareness is exactly what makes someone sound more natural. Not just correct, but genuinely natural.
There is a difference between those two things, isn't there? You can be grammatically correct and still sound a bit robotic.
Completely. And I think that connects to something broader, which is how different cultures actually think about discipline and what it means to speak or behave in a disciplined way.
That is interesting because I feel like the word discipline carries very different emotional weight depending on where you are from.
It really does. In a lot of Western cultures, especially in the United States, there is this very loud celebration of what people call hustle culture. The idea that you should always be working, always be optimizing, always be pushing harder.
And if you're resting, you're falling behind.
Exactly. Rest gets treated almost like a guilty pleasure rather than a necessary part of functioning well.
Which is honestly exhausting just to think about.
It is. And then you look at something like the Japanese concept of kaizen, which is this philosophy of continuous small improvement. Not dramatic overhauls, not grinding yourself into the ground, just tiny, consistent steps forward every single day.
Kaizen. I've heard that word before, but I did not know that's what it meant.
It literally translates to change for the better. And the beauty of it is that it takes the pressure off. You're not trying to transform overnight, you're just trying to be slightly better today than you were yesterday.
That feels so much more sustainable than the hustle culture version.
It does. And I think the healthiest approach probably lives somewhere between the two. You need some drive, some ambition, but you also need to build in recovery and flexibility.
Because a person who is rigid about their discipline, who cannot adapt when life gets messy, that person is going to break eventually.
And this is where a really important concept comes in, which is delayed gratification. It's the ability to resist something you want right now in favor of something better later.
Like choosing to study instead of watching TV, even though the TV is right there and the studying feels hard.
Exactly. And delayed gratification is deeply connected to intrinsic motivation, which is the kind of motivation that comes from inside you, from genuinely caring about the outcome, not from external rewards like grades or money or praise.
Because external motivation runs out. If you're only disciplined when someone is watching or when there's a reward waiting, the moment that goes away, so does the behavior.
Right. And that's actually where self-sabotage becomes really relevant. Because sometimes people have genuine intrinsic motivation. They truly want to change, but they keep unconsciously doing things that get in their own way.
Self-sabotage. That is such a heavy phrase, but it's so accurate for certain patterns.
It is. And it often happens because on some level, change feels threatening, even positive change, because it's unfamiliar and the brain tends to prefer familiar things, even when those familiar things are not good for us.
So part of building discipline is also learning to recognize when you're self-sabotaging, when you're the one standing in your own way.
And that kind of self-awareness is not always comfortable, but it is incredibly valuable.
Self-discipline is often misunderstood as punishment, isn't it? Like people think being disciplined means being harsh with yourself.
And that framing, that it is somehow about suffering or restriction, that is actually one of the biggest misconceptions. True discipline is about freedom, the freedom that comes from following through on what you said you would do.
That reframe is genuinely powerful. Discipline as freedom, not as a cage.
And I think that is actually a really beautiful place to land after everything we have talked about today.
It is, because when I think back to the beginning of this conversation, I came in talking about a report I kept putting off. And now I'm thinking about freedom.
That is the journey, honestly. And I think what strikes me most is that self-discipline is not this cold, rigid thing. It's actually quite personal.
It is. What looks like discipline for one person might look completely different for another, and that's okay.
Because it's not about copying someone else's routine or matching some ideal image. It's about building something that actually works for your life, your brain, your circumstances.
And being honest enough with yourself to know the difference between what sounds impressive and what actually moves you forward.
That honesty piece is hard, though, because we all have this version of ourselves we want to be, and sometimes the gap between that version and where we actually are feels really discouraging.
But the gap is not the problem. The gap is just where the work happens.
I love that. The gap is where the work happens. Not a sign of failure, just the space between where you are and where you're going.
And every small step you take in that space counts, even the ones that feel invisible at the time.
And I think that's something worth sitting with, because so often we discount the small things, the tiny choices, the quiet moments of following through, but those are actually the building blocks of everything.
And on that note, I want to ask you something. Everyone listening and watching right now, what is one small habit you're trying to build at the moment? It doesn't have to be big or impressive. It just has to be yours.
Drop it in the comments. We genuinely want to know. And honestly, just writing it down is already a step toward making it real.
I might even share mine in the comments too, just to be accountable.
I will hold you to that. And to everyone who made it all the way to the end of this episode, thank you so much. It genuinely means everything to us.
This conversation went in directions I did not expect, and I loved every bit of it.
Same. And if you got something out of it, if even one idea shifted something for you, please share it with someone who might need to hear it too.
And if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel and leave a like on this video. It helps more people find us, and the bigger this community grows, the better the conversations get.
We put a lot of love into every episode, and knowing you're out there listening makes it all worth it.
Until next time, keep showing up for yourself, even on the hard days.
Especially on the hard days.
Especially on the hard days. Take care, everyone.
Bye for now, and we'll see you in the next one.